Today's episode is kindly sponsored by Prosperous Universe, a sci-fi game I suspect a few of you might be very interested in. Stick around at the end for more information. Hey everybody, I'm Daniel from Spacedock, and man, isn't the Danube class runabout just great? It's such a nifty little design. I've got to be completely honest, all the way across Star Trek, I've never really been a fan of the shuttlecraft designs. Star Trek has a tendency to gravitate towards sort of minivan, flying crate kind of things. None of them look particularly smart. A lot of them have those really slow garage door kind of hatchways on the aft that don't look very practical. They make decent enough window dressing for shots, but none of them are really particularly endearing designs. But the Danube class runabout is just functionality made manifest. You can tell how reliable it is just by looking at it, and it's got so much interesting lore behind it. Technically speaking, the Danube class is not actually a shuttlecraft. It's the smallest classification of vessel that Starfleet considers to be an actual starship, which is why they have USS prefixes and registry numbers. They've got a fair bit more range than your average shuttlecraft, and a lot of modularity to them. Across Deep Space Nine, we see some of them outfitted with different mission pods on the top-aft section. Sometimes they get photon torpedo launchers added, sometimes they get sensor pods and various other useful gadgets, and we see these things tank a lot of firepower from much larger vessels many times across the series. They also seem to be able to survive quite hard landings on planets, as we see with the Rio Grande in the episode The Ascent, which is evidently recovered by a later episode despite suffering quite a serious crash. I also love how you can keep track of these things across Deep Space Nine as you watch the show. They originally start out with the 3 runabouts delivered to them by the Enterprise D, those being the USS Rio Grande, the USS Yangtze Kiang, and the USS Ganges. And the first of many DS9 runabouts to bite the dust is the USS Yangtze Kiang, which on only its second real mission winds up crashing into a moon full of crazy warring tribals and is too heavily damaged to be recovered. This leads to the ship being replaced by the USS Orinoco, which manages to survive a couple of seasons itself. And if you're paying attention, you can follow the legacy of all of Deep Space Nine's runabouts, all named after various rivers on Earth, which seems to not just be a tradition held by the DS9 crew, but across the entire Danube class, wherever they might be assigned. It also nicely informs the rising stakes in Deep Space Nine quite well, because if you're paying attention, in Season 4, suddenly Deep Space Nine has 4 runabouts assigned to it instead of 3, with the addition of the USS Volga, whilst the Rubicon, Rio Grande and Ganges are all still in service. The station is becoming a more important place, and the danger of war is rising. Security becomes more important, and it's useful that the station can have runabouts in various places at once, or maintain all the aspects of its patrol group and defensive screen, whilst at least one of them is away doing something useful. The ship's interior is also wonderfully modular and well designed. By reading the technical manuals, you can find out that it has a horizontally oriented warp core that's built into the ventral section of the ship, and you can actually kind of see the housing for it on the exterior 3D model. This leaves almost all of the internal space open for habitation, with a nice sturdy-looking cockpit area with a central transporter pad, good wide visibility on the cockpit canopy, and as we see in a certain TNG episode, the runabout also has a nice little galley/conference room in the aft section, in the area where those horizontal windows can be seen on the exterior model. Much like the Defiant itself, as described by Commander Riker, the Danube Runabout really does put out a tough little ship kind of vibe. It's useful and long-lasting and long-range and durable, and they have a great sense of familiarity across the show, always seeming to get the job done. In Season 2's The Jem'Hadar, when the first contact with the Dominion is being had, and the resultant disaster that follows, 3 Danube Runabouts are considered to be a useful contributing factor to the overall task group around the USS Odyssey, a Galaxy-class ship. Despite being up against a number of Dominion vessels, all of which are equipped with shield-ignoring polaron beams, the 3 runabouts manage to protect the doomed Odyssey for quite a while, and then all of them escape the battle intact when the Galaxy-class vessel doesn't quite manage it. And they seem to be quite a real threat to the Jem'Hadar attack ships during the battle. You could also cite in Purgatory's Shadow and the Dyer's Cast, where a Danube runabout manages to survive for quite some time in the middle of the chaos of the Battle of the Omarion Nebula. Despite being fired at by ships from all sides, it lasts long enough for its crew to be beamed off by the Defiant. Same again in Valiant, when the ship endures attacks from a number of Dominion ships long enough to be rescued by the USS Valiant. Time and time again we see this ship attacked by swarms of powerful Dominion vessels, often with weapons that ignore shields, and despite the Danube Runabout not being described as carrying ablative armor or any kind of additional hull armoring, just the durability and strength of its own space frame seems to keep it alive under these circumstances. And isn't this just one of the traits that you can really latch onto with a science fiction spacecraft? just the ship that keeps on going. When everything's broken down, when it's up against ridiculous odds, when nothing works anymore, or at least it shouldn't, it just keeps pushing on by some will of its own, by some kind of inexplicable, inherent quality that just allows it to keep functioning when really it should be a complete wreck, totally beyond repair. Almost every runabout assigned to DS9 has at least one story like that. And perhaps the most endearing thing of all with these ships is that the USS Rio Grande manages to survive all 7 seasons of the show, despite its sister ships being frequently blown up and crashed and abandoned on a regular basis. The Rio Grande goes from being dropped off by the Enterprise in Season 1 all the way to dropping Cisco in the Cave of the Par Wraiths on Bajor at the end of Season 7, and it endures no shortage of punishment in the space in between, rather emblematic of Deep Space Nine itself and of the characters living aboard the station. It should also be said that this is yet another example of what separates Deep Space Nine from Voyager and other Star Trek shows running at the same time, as they bothered to exhaustively keep track of the names and numbers of the runabouts that they had, when they were lost, what they were replaced with, how long they had them for. Deep Space Nine, a show about a Federation starbase in Federation space that can be constantly resupplied by the Federation whenever it needs it, does a better job of keeping track of scarcity and resources than Voyager did, a show based around scarcity and resources, at least theoretically, as Voyager managed to abandon its entire premise within 40 minutes of starting. The USS Voyager seems to have an infinite supply of shuttlecraft, and apparently enough resources to build 2 Delta flyers without any assistance in the middle of the Delta Quadrant. Where Voyager wastes the potential of its own central premise, Deep Space Nine still takes care to make sure that this aspect is done right, even in a show that's not really about that theme. Just another of the many, many examples of Deep Space Nine really putting effort and love and care and passion into every tiny detail of its craft, and just another reason why it is easily my favourite Star Trek series. So let us all raise a Raktajino to the Danube-class runabout that we followed through thick and thin as we watch this somber memorial for all of those Danube-class runabouts that were tragically lost in the line of duty. Thank you for listening. This is Daniel from Spacedock, signing off. This week's episode is sponsored by Prosperous Universe, which is a space economic simulator in the same vein as the Egosoft X games and EVE Online, but unlike those games, it eschews all of that unnecessary 3D space action, which we all know is secretly only there so that we can all pretend that we're well-adjusted normal people playing a normal people game. Prosperous Universe is just brave enough to admit it. I know you're there in my audience, all you people who've spent hundreds of hours building a highly efficient space tofu chain in X3, or driving up the price of fictional asteroid metals in EVE Online. You weirdos are my brothers and sisters, and this game is for you. It's a new avenue for your fix, and it's all funneled through the gorgeous Apex interface. So go and check it out. You'll be supporting Spacedock, and you will find no judgment here. But remember the 9th rule of acquisition. Opportunity plus instinct equals profit. This is Daniel from Spacedock, signing off. Thank you for watching Spacedock. If you're interested in supporting the channel, please do check out the links on the screen right now or in the description below for our Patreon and channel membership services. Anything you can pledge goes towards improving our team and our equipment and allowing us to put together bigger and more exciting video projects for you guys on the channel.